in the world of graphic arts and comics. He started his own comics press at one point and had his own series of comic books called All Atomic Comics. Is that right?
Well, I had 5 printings, 5 editions of it, but it wasn't really a series.
Got it. Oh, okay. 5 editions does not a series make. So today he's going to talk to us about visual representations of global climate change. And I'm told that we are going to get to draw something. So, So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Katie Dicker. Thank you, Leonard. Thank you, Deanna Instructor, for the work to make this series possible. Thank you all for being here. I've changed the title of my talk a couple of times. Is Visualizing Global Climate Change, Professional and Homemade Images. And when I figured what I had time to talk about, let me close that. There. Okay.
I'll set it back up, please.
So, but I'll tell you what it was on that next slide. What I'm going to be doing today is introducing 2 of the activities that I've done with my students about visualizing climate change. The first of them has to do with homemade images. The second one brings in the professional images. So, thank you. And plus I'll have a conclusion. And so, as Katie said, I have a background as a creator of educational comic books. That's All Atomic Comics, which I wrote and drew and self-published about hazards and problems of nuclear power. I teach here at Seattle Central Community College the Introduction to Film class and a class in Introduction to Comic Books and Graphic Novels, Humanities 270. And 2 times I taught English 106, Technical Writing, and today's talk is based on exercises that I did with those students. This is another comic book which I published in 1980, Energy Comics, Dangers and Opportunities of Energy Choices. And on the in the introduction to that comic, I said that we may yet pay a great price if burning fossil fuels changes world climate. So that was 33 years ago. And I've had time to become an expert in global climate change, but I have not done so. When I saw the display of books that had been set out, I recognized all of the books on comics. I own most of those. The books on global climate change, I'm not as familiar with. So I know we have one instructor here at least, and the lessons that I give can be taught without really knowing that much about climate change. And the first one I call decartoon. And so this is a word that I made up. I'm going to explain what I meant by it, and then I immediately changed the meaning of it, and so how I changed it. And the ideas grew out of my experiences drawing a comic about hunger, Food First Comics. And the introduction to this comic was by a woman who co-founded the organization that published it, Frances Moore LePay. And she said, this comic book asks you to take off one set of glasses for focusing on a world problem. It challenges you to try on another pair and then to look again. And that was the beginning of this idea. The work that they did was presented in the form of myths and our response. And the basic myth that the organization worked with was that people are hungry in the world because there's too many people or not enough food. And what Frances Moore LePay had discovered in the library was that there was plenty of food. The growing enough food was not the problem. And they redid their calculations recently and found that it's even more true now than it was then. And so I did a comic book for them, Exploding the Myth of Scarcity, Food First Comics, to help publicize that perspective. Frances Moore LePay argues that the images that we have in our minds, our mental images, help us see the world in particular ways, and they prevent us from seeing it in other ways. It gives us blind spots. And so it occurred to me that rather than just trying to give people new ideas or different ways of seeing things, it might be a good use of my time to spend more time trying to think about the images that people already have in our heads, in their heads, in our heads. And so this is not something that I drew for that organization. I drew this for another publisher. But it's picturing a variety of ways that people who do have enough food can imagine their relationship with people who do not, as ways not to try to create an image that was original or funny or clever, but just to try to come up with something that's the most cliche image possible of something that people may already be thinking about. So this is one way of thinking about the relation between people with and without food, the idea that poor people, hungry, starving children are destroying the earth and using up all its resources. And again, the idea is to try to focus on ideas that are already out there in circulation. When I never imagined at that point that I would become a classroom teacher. And as soon as I got in front of a room full of people, the idea of decartooning, as I was thinking of it, changed immediately. Because rather than stand in front of you and say, people have these false ideas, maybe you have these false ideas, these are a bunch of wrong ideas, because we're all here together, it seemed a great opportunity for me to just find out what ideas we do have. And so rather than being an exercise to expose myths, it turned into a way of sharing understandings. And so in decartooning assignments, and I've done them on a variety of different kinds of subjects and topics, we make visible to ourselves and to each other how we are imagining some topic, what we think about it. And so rather than looking for right and wrong drawings, what we're looking for is what we have in common and what our differences are. So I would like everyone to take a piece of paper. Please pass this around as quickly as you can. Is there anyone who needs a pencil? Okay. And it looks like there's some books behind you. You might be able to use to help you draw. And if any of you find this particularly interesting, I do have a handout that explains it in more detail, which you can pick up afterwards. Okay, so this is what I tried in my technical writing class last quarter. The assignment was this. This drawing exercise is to discover what kinds of ideas are circulating about global climate change. My goals do not include changing your ideas, but just making them visible to think about. No special artistic skill is required, and such skill does not necessarily make a drawing any more informative, useful, or valuable. A lot of people draw stick figures, which is fine because there's an amazing amount of information that we can learn from a stick figure drawing. So this is the assignment. Draw a picture, image, cartoon, or illustration showing what you think about global climate change, also known as global warming, anthropogenic climate change, and by other names. And Okay, what I'd like you to do next is write a paragraph on the back of the paper describing your drawing. And the last part of the assignment is that I gave on in my class was write whether you were willing to let me use your drawing as part of these kinds of presentations. I've figured for enough time that 5 volunteers can come up and use this hover cam to show us what they came up with. Yeah, there'll be time for 5 volunteers.
Great, so long as I'm warm. Thanks.
You can take that Humanities Washington thing away.
Oh.
Just there to show where to put the.
I just drew the earth with the scarf. Well, that's supposed to be a scarf and a hat, and the sun beating on it. And then it's just asking if it could take his hat and scarf off. And then I have all the people and a guy driving a big car, and they're basically saying no. Keep it cooking. Oh, they're jotting stuff down right now.
Good job. This is really good.
You have another person.
Oh, go for it.
No.
No.
Both of you guys.
I think we should duel it out.
Mine's really quick.
You go for it.
I'm just going to read the prepared statement. My answer is yes, you can use this. It's pretty easy. The paper is the Arctic shelf, as well as our collective thinking about climate change. Nobody's doing anything, and so we all think less as bloods boil about the issue. This inertia lets the ice melt ever faster, to the silent screaming apart of nature. Where is the whiskey glass? I'm going to need this.
Is this it? No? Sideways? There we go. Cool. Alright, so pretty much what I drew is both influences from the planet and the sun itself is contributing to a breach in the ozone layer, which allows the sun's rays to, draw a warmer climate on the planet, which also has a lot of different effects on it. And I pretty much labeled, each of the illustrations in the pictures. So that's pretty much it.
Nope. Yeah. How do I just zoom it out? So yeah, I drew a giant of a nomadic, and it's the sun, the Earth's getting cooked, and I do something really, and then I do this. It's the Earth talking to the moon, saying, "I'm getting really hot," and the moon's like, "Lose the ozone layer."
My hero.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So at one of the last conversations on social issues lecture, one of the speakers was talking about that pretty much most of the oil that can be extracted by typical means is pretty much accounted for, and that what we're doing now to extract oil that's embedded within the earth is doing so much damage that will eventually hit a point of no return. So I figure this is somewhat self-explanatory on that front, I hope.
There are more hands. So.
Ooh, cool. So I don't know, I just kind of started labeling, and I said pretty much the impact of climate change is waste, our lifestyle, our means like transportation, there's a little car, airplane, boats, they all run on gas or, I don't know, coal. And yeah, and then I drew the ozone layer. Yeah, so a lot of heat.
So, and now to get back. Alt tab. Alt.
Other side.
Tab. All right. So thank you for those drawings and statements. I had some examples in case nobody volunteered for my class. So, huh? If there's time afterwards. So what I learned from my students last November is that many people, generalizing from the students in my class, regard the problem as serious, regard the problem as hopeless, see the problem in symbolic terms as a globe on fire or melting, and blame ourselves or people like us, and have little idea about how to respond to the issue. I wasn't anticipating to see so many students in the room today. I'm glad that you're here. I had predicted that today's drawings would be more focused on local aspects of the issue and clearer about what can be done, because there is so much that's being done locally this week in particular. So I'll show some slides about that later. So that was the decartooning exercise. If you'd like to hold on to it, you can. I would love to see what you did. So if you want to show me that afterwards, I would like to see that. The other lesson that I've used just gets into the professional illustration, illustrated arguments. When I was teaching technical writing in 2008, it came time for the week on using graphics with technical writing. And just by chance, that Sunday, Bill McKibben had an article published in the Los Angeles Times called Civilization's Last Chance. The planet is at a tipping point on climate change, and it gets much worse fast. And so I assigned them to illustrate the article, choose illustrations that would bring out what was in the article. And I looked back on that assignment this morning, and I saw that the focus was on using graphics effectively, and that I gave the option of illustrating either McKibben's arguments or the arguments of somebody who had who had written against him. So when I first wrote this assignment, I made the mistake of saying I wanted graphics that would make the argument more clear and attractive. What I meant was graphics that would be attractive and make the argument easier to understand, so that once we understand the argument more clearly, it becomes more attractive. It's because it's a strong argument, less attractive, weaker argument. And what students turned in were emphasized cliche images about global warming and not anything that was new or important in McKibben's article. So I decided that I would draw my own pictures to illustrate what was in McKibben's article in 2008. He said that we were quickly nearing a level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere which would cause irreversible damage. We had until the year 2012 to change direction. So there's the car. At that time we were at 385 points per million and trying to change direction before hitting 450. The second part of his argument was that actually, according to new calculations, that danger zone that we thought was still coming up we're actually in it. It started at 350 parts per million. And so he organized a group called 350.org that year to try to organize people around this issue. I became very interested through giving this lesson and reading more about climate change at that time. And so one of the things I did after that class was over, I organized an art show of 16 local cartoonists on the theme of local aspects of climate change. And that show was held here at Seattle Central Community College in October, November 2009. Each of the cartoonists approached it from their own style, with their own direction. I only have one example to show you some of the work that was in the show. This is by a cartoonist who had an advice column where people would send in relationship problems, and then his character, Tiny Seppuku, would answer. So I sent in my question. Dear Tiny, I live in Seattle. Should I worry about global climate change? Leonard. You shouldn't worry about it, but you should prepare for some adjustments. Any weekend plans? Camping on Mount Rainier Island. You might also want to consider a new state tree, Olympic National Forest. The rising temperature may benefit some people, like the city's coffee drinkers. Seattle's best coffee plantation, next exit. Pick your own coffee beans, 50 cents a pound. But Seattle's software and game developers won't be impacted at all by climate change. How about the crazy weather outside, eh? What is this outside you speak of? So, the next time I had a chance to teach this class in technical writing, I assigned my students for the week on using graphics to illustrate Bill McKibben's article, Global Warming's Terrifying New Math, which had been published by Rolling Stone last July. And I warned them that the previous time that I'd given this assignment, people had not used graphics to show what was new and what was important in the article. So I really wanted them to show me that they understood what was new and important in this article. This is the assignment. Propose graphics as many, you don't have to do it here, I'm just telling you what they did. Propose graphics as many as you think appropriate for McKibben's article, Global Warming's Terrifying New Math. Your audience, Seattle Central Community College students. You can imagine submitting something to the Central Circuit, the New City Collegian, or designing a poster. Your purpose, alert people to what is most important in this article, including supplementary information if needed, and ignoring the less important parts. Submit graphics and or written descriptions of your proposed graphics, accompanied by rough sketches of what they would look like. Explain your choices. And this is one of the solutions that was submitted by one of the students. I selected this picture as I found it attention-grabbing, as the picture suggests that the Earth is on fire. But the picture does not say anything about what was new or important in McKibben's article last July. And also, I think this kind of image encourages people to think that the whole idea is over-exaggerated and not a real problem, because the Earth is not on fire. This was another graphic that was proposed by one of my students, yesterday, today, tomorrow. And this was, a student said, I don't believe in global warming. Global warming is compared to the erosion that happened to ancient Mayan Indians. It destroyed the ancient Mayan civilization, but not the world. I believe that this is the same in the modern world. And what this does, one thing it reminds me of is he's using the same image of the Earth melting that the other person proposed, but he's using it to illustrate the idea that he does not believe in global warming. Well, global warming is not a religion, so that doesn't bother me. But one of the things that is interesting here is that he's comparing it to the destruction of a previous civilization. And so that opens up the question about how is our situation today different from the civilizations throughout history that have collapsed. From what I had the chance to write down, I understand that the purpose in this exercise is to alert people, audience students, to what is most important through graphics. I chose graphics that are informative and entertaining rather than stuffed with data graphs, because it's not specifically targeted towards people in the scientific, economic, or political community. I hope I understood the assignment correctly and this is acceptable. Well, the way that the assignment works is I do a lot of credit, no credit assignments. If you submitted a graphic, you got credit. So this was perfectly acceptable as showing me what one person would choose to illustrate the article and for what reason. It doesn't say anything about what was new or important in the article. But what I find most interesting in this explanation is that it suggests that students are not part of a political community. And I think that if we're not part of a political community, then it really doesn't matter how much we learn about global climate change, because the information is not going to do anything. The idea whether this is acceptable, one of the things that worked out well is that because people were just choosing graphics, and I was not naming them, I was just putting all of their choices on slides and then describing them one after another, it worked out pretty well, where people were able to consider all these different pictures. And because the grade wasn't going to be influenced up or down by anything that was said, we were able to kind of think about what it would take to illustrate this article. My piece stemmed from a line that particularly struck me in the article on the second page. Scientists estimate that humans can pour roughly 565 more gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by mid-century and still have some reasonable hope of staying below 2 degrees. Reasonable in this case means 4 chances in 5. And so the graphic, which was an original graphic, everything is fine. We only have 1 in 5 chance of ruining our planet's safety by 2050. Russian roulette is a safer alternative, where you get 1 in 6 chances. But other than that, everything really is fine. See for yourself at everythingisfine.com. And my comment on this graphic was that the article wasn't saying that we're going to have 565 more gigatons of carbon in 2050. It says if there is, then these are what the chances look like. And by taking out that if, by taking out the possibility that there might be more than that or less than that, we remove any chance that we have for making a difference to the future. I envision this graphic as a standalone piece that could be used as a flyer or perhaps a poster targeted toward the SCCC student audience. In the graphic, I've attempted to visually represent the 3 key points from the article and the combined effect on Earth. And I was glad to see that this one identified the numbers that Bill McKibben regarded as basic to his terrifying new math, but it didn't really show how those numbers related to each other. 2 degrees Celsius maximum warming limit, 565 gigatons, and so forth. So, as I did in 2008, after seeing what everyone else had done, I sat down and tried to figure out how I would explain graphically what was going on in this article. The terrifying new math. I started out by drawing a bar representing Earth's atmosphere contains about 3,160 gigatons of carbon dioxide, which was not in the article, but which I thought was necessary for context. We could add another 565 gigatons and still have a reasonable chance of staying below a 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. But we have proven coal, oil, and gas reserves that would add another 2,795 gigatons of carbon dioxide, enough to guarantee a climate disaster. Today's market value of the coal, oil, and gas that we must not burn, $20 trillion, almost a fourth of all the goods and services sold in the world in 1 year. And that was the terrifying new math that McKibben presented in that article. And you don't have to agree with the analysis. What I find that I like about this assignment is that even if you're not an expert in it, you can read one article and interpret it and then find out how other people interpret it. What I learned was it became much easier for me to see who did not understand or did not read McKibben's article compared to if I'd asked him to write about it. Also, it reminded me that existing climate change graphics have come to center around a few familiar and stale themes. And that many people seem to think of graphics simply as decorations rather than as carriers of information, potentially extremely powerful carriers of information. This is an example of the kind of information graphic that I love. How skeptics view global warming. Well, it's global warming stopped. Look, in the last 10 years, or it stopped going up, and then the realists say, no, look, this is the trend, in that red line, and then in the blue lines, you see people saying, no, if it was going up, it stopped. Look, it's not going up anymore. And I love that graphic, but I was reading something by Francis Moore Lepay, who I told you about at the beginning, who got me started on this de-cartooning business. And so what I'm going to do is give you a kind of a paraphrase of what I gleaned from an article that she had published last year as it applies to climate change. It says that graphing percentages, degrees, volumes, other numbers, although vitally necessary, may not generate the kinds of pictures that we most need. Because if we focus on quantities, that can blind us to what we could be more profitably focusing on, which is the quality of our relationships, the relationships that connect us and on which our survival depends. Because a person could become a master at all these kinds of graphs and so forth, and that by itself is not going to make a difference in the world. So I put that heart back on this slide again, the one I showed at the beginning, because it had to do with relationships, and I tried really hard to think how I could make it connect any better than that, and I couldn't do it. So that's the conclusion I had. I've actually got some more slides, or else I could open it for questions at this point. I'm going to show you some more slides. As luck would have it, the people of the Pacific Northwest have been given another unusual opportunity to make a global difference, the way that we did when the World Trade Organization made their wonderful decision to come to Seattle for the ministerial meeting. And so that's why I was surprised that when people came up and showed the ideas about global climate change, I was expecting today to see people thinking of it in relation to what this means to Seattle and to the Puget Sound and to the surrounding area, and what concretely people can be doing about it. For example, Friday there's going to be people standing at the 50th Street overpass where the sign is against the coal trains. And that night there's going to be a film and discussion about chasing ice at the Meaningful Movies in Wallingford. On Saturday there's going to be prayer-guided meditation ceremony and songs to support the climate rally going on in Washington, D.C. And then there's going to be a bunch of bicyclists get together in a thing called Bike Forward, which is also to support clean energy, rejecting dirty, dangerous tar sands. And then also on Sunday, there's a teach-in at the University of Washington, and there's a walking train against coal trains, kind of a demonstration coming up. And so on Monday, there's that Idle No More Onward, they're having another meeting. So the idea that nobody's doing anything and that people are just, if they're united at all, it's in order to say onward toward destruction. That's something which I think that in Seattle in the course of the next few months and years is going to be an idea held by fewer and fewer people. This is a drawing that I did, and after I drew it I thought, what's wrong with this drawing of the earth again in flames, with that unrealistic kind of image, cracking open like an egg with an eye emerging from it, is that there's no hands, there's no community. It's just, and I think that that's really the images that I have not shown you. The images that we need is how we can collaboratively build shared understandings, challenge ourselves to come up with more meaningful pictures, but then also visualize taking meaningful action. This is a picture of Bill McKibben's talk at Benaroya Hall last November, and the place was packed. So, now are there questions? Okay.
So that last picture that you had up there, well, not that one, the illustration, yeah. said it has no hands or no feet or
Yeah.
anything, so I assume you're saying that, you know, people are idly standing by watching as all of this is going on?
What I'm saying is there was a drawing I did to try to celebrate dawning birth of awareness, and yet it may not be, it doesn't express everything I would like it to, because awareness without doing anything except sitting in a burning eggshell is not as much awareness as you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's a sort of artistic, graceful skill in combining factual information? Edward Tufte just very beautifully writes about
Yes.
the abstract part.
Yes.
Incorporating factual information with the spiritual qualities that you're trying to convey.
I think that for that kind of combination, nothing beats comics. Because with comic books, you can, I've put in information graphics in my comics, back in the Energy comics and All Atomic comics, for example, they had maps and graphs and charts and so forth. And then with the comic, you have the possibility of stories. You have the possibility of characters. You have the possibility, all kinds of possibilities. So if any of you are not drawing comic books yet, you might want to consider that. Yes?
Speaking of comics, because I really like that one, would it be possible for us to see the other images from other classes? You
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
them if there was
Yeah, I said that I wasn't going to show them because I was lucky enough to get some volunteers today. So I'll show you some things that my students came up with for their D-cartoons. Okay. My cartoon shows two men participating in the warming of the planet while saying something needs to be done about it. Very few people are willing to make significant changes in lifestyle in order to help out. Somebody really ought to do something about all this global warming. I know, right? It's getting ridiculous. And it's pouring gas on the flames. And then this was another one in that class. Simply put, a hand is holding a skewer that has pierced the earth and is holding the earth over a campfire, emulating someone cooking marshmallows.
Yeah.
And then another one, a more complicated drawing. I'll give you a second to look at it. The skulls with dollar signs in their eyes represent people in power who care more about money than life. The dollar sign on fire represents money burned or wasted. What good is it if we're dead? There are many people who live in their own happy bubbles with stars in their eyes who seem apathetic or ignorant to the destruction going on around. The skulls are small because the problem doesn't seem obvious. So those were the examples that I thought.
They're fantastic.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yes. And that's one of the things that keeps me experimenting with this technique is that when I ask people, well, what do you think? An enormous amount of information comes in, which I would never have learned if I just was telling people what they think.
I now have a serious question, if
Yeah.
you wouldn't mind. What would you say to people who have really great ideas, but don't exactly have the means to fight what seems to be a kind of crowdsourced strategy on the part of the same multinational conglomerates who use massive amounts of capital in pre-existing, already failed systems of organization to essentially suck creative juice out of the artists, appropriate the content for their purposes, and then continue on as though nothing's happened, leaving the person who drew this at 25 to try to make a difference hung by the left 10 years later at 35 when it turns out that they, a mere artist, couldn't save the world but tried.
Well, an artist, no artist by him or herself is going to save the world. And the good part about that is it kind of lets us have a more human scale of responsibility for what's happening. Because if it was up to us, if I thought that I could have saved the world by drawing a comic book, then it would be a crushing burden that I didn't draw that comic.
I'm just wondering if the corporations don't benefit more than we do
By
from all
what?
this production of
From
art and
producing
slogans.
images? The comics that I created, Energy Comics, All Atomic Comics, were part of something that was called the Underground Comics Movement. And I'd be happy to explain what that meant to you sometime.
Cool.
Yes?
Could you explain a little bit about what you said? If we're not involved in the political community.
Not necessarily the existing political community.
I didn't get what you meant.
What I meant was, it's very easy to become immersed in libraries full of data, and if we don't have a way of using our judgments and our information in what we decided would be the better path in a way that contributes to the direction that the broader society is taking, then what is the value of all that knowledge?
So pretty much if you because
Yes.
you're not going to use it for,
Yeah.
unity purposes.
Without the insight that we're all in this together,
Right.
a lot of things are never going to happen. Yeah.
I'm curious what the responses might be from people in this room to these kinds of images and these kinds of ideas, and the idea that that if we can know all this, but if we don't participate in some way because of anything, I'm just curious if anybody has a response.
Well, personally, I feel like at this point, it's kind of common sense because I've been bombarded with so much information about it throughout my years of growing up, like imagery and everything else. It's kind of like, well, we know there is an existence of global warming, except for minus the people that are in denial about it, So I kind of feel like, it's, when I see images like this or, other images, I'm kind of like, oh, well, it's about global warming, minus the next person that would go, oh, what is that? Because I don't know what global warming is, but it's kind of like, have you been under a rock?
I think are you kind of saying though that if they almost have kind of lost an effect because we've all been hearing about it for so long, that they might not have as much effect obviously as when we first came out with images of like the burning earth or things like that. But seeing it in new ways, visualizing it in new ways, like this one particularly is really fascinating to me. So I think seeing it in new ways sometimes makes you start to think again about it, so that in a new way as well, and start thinking maybe what else could I be doing about it, as opposed to just being like, oh, global warming, yep, it's a fact, okay, in the back of your mind all the time.
I think when you see too many images, you become desensitized
I think
about
that's
certain issues sometimes.
you can.
Well, but are the typical images, are the images that we've seen been cartoon images, or have they been like a real bear on a piece of ice that's, shrinking? I mean, I think a lot of what I've seen is photo images, and so this presents something a little different. I mean, we've seen some of it.
I think discussions provide a different, it's a more engaging way of looking at issues. So I think discussion around images is more effective than the image itself. If that makes sense. Because, it's different versus seeing an image and go, oh, it's about global warming, walk away, versus, hey, did you see that picture on global warming? It's crazy, right? Yeah, you're talking about it. So I think it's like you said, the effect of it is, if it's group oriented, it has a bigger effect than like, just seeing it, not talking about it.
I guess this has a more general question about this talk or any, because I know a lot of you students come to the Thursday talks every week. So have you felt the desire to be an activist based on any of this? Like, do these images make you want to go to the 50th Avenue Bridge over I-5, or ride your bike, or or go to DC? I mean, has anyone acted on any of these conversations? You have?
Yeah, I personally have. I am basically talking about it, making people aware. I've been telling people about the coal terminal. I already don't drive a car. I mean, I take what I feel personally about these, kind
being trained against coal trains, even better.
All right, and on that cheerful note, I've got a class to get to. I thank you so much for your attention. And if you'd like more information about recycling, I've got the flyer about
There's a really good event going on tomorrow at 10 o'clock at B1110. Mark Gonzalez will be talking.
All right.
D-Day.
What?